Have you ever noticed how often we see percentages in everyday life? Discounts at stores, test scores, interest rates, or even your phone battery. All of them use percentages. But what exactly does percent mean? The word percent literally means per hundred. It tells us how many parts out of 100 we're talking about. So if something is 25%, that means 25 out of every 100 parts. We can write a percentage in three main ways: as a percent, a fraction, or as a decimal. For example, 50% is the same as 50 over 100, which equals 0.5 or 5 tenths. Each form shows the same idea, a part of a whole, just written differently. The idea of comparing parts to 100 goes way back, even to ancient Rome. Merchants and tax collectors used the term percentum, a Latin phrase meaning by the hundred. Over time, this evolved into the modern English word percent. Percentages make comparisons easy. No matter how big or small the numbers are, we can quickly understand that 90% on a test is excellent, or that a 50% off sale means we pay half the price. They give us a common language for describing parts of a whole in business, science, sports, and everyday life. Now that you know what percentages are, let's look at some basic examples. All right, to determine what percentage of the total figure is shaded, let's start by counting all of the parts, both shaded and unshaded. We can see there are a total of 10 parts, and out of those 10, 4 of them are shaded. Now, remember, a percentage always means out of 100. So the question we're really asking is, what would this fraction look like if it were out of 100 instead of 10? To change our total of 10 into 100, we multiply by 10. And since we multiplied the denominator by 10, we have to do the same thing to the numerator, multiply it by 10 as well. 4 times 10 equals 40. So now we have a fraction that's equivalent to 4 tenths, but written out of 100. That's 40 hundredths, or 40 over 100. That's one way to write our percentage, as a fraction. Now, if we want to write it as a decimal, we can start with the original fraction, 4 tenths. 4 tenths is the same as 0.4 because the 4 is located in the tenths place. If you didn't know that, you could find it through division. Take the numerator, which is 4, and divide it by the denominator, which is 10. To set this up, write 4.0 and then divide by 10. 10 goes into 44 times, which gives us 0.4. Now, technically, we're dividing 10 into 4, and 10 doesn't fit into 4 a whole number of times. It fits into 4 4/10ths of a time. That's why our answer is 0.4. It represents a part of a whole, not a whole number itself. You can think of it as saying 10 goes into 4 4/10ths of a time. We often imagine it as 10 going into 40 just to make the division easier, but mathematically what's really happening is that we're finding a fraction of the whole, which makes sense because that's exactly what a decimal represents. Because 10 doesn't go into 0 any more times, we stop there, and our decimal is 0.4, or 0 and 4 tenths. Finally, we can write our answer as a percentage. Because 0.4 is equal to 40 out of 100, we can write it as 40 with the percent symbol at the end. Now, let's connect what we just did with this picture. On the right, we see a model divided into 10 equal parts. 4 of these parts are shaded, which matches the fraction we started with, 4 out of 10. On the left, that same model is divided into 100 smaller squares. Notice that there are still the same amount of shaded overall, just broken into smaller pieces. Since each of the 10 rows has 10 squares, that gives us 100 total parts. And because we originally had 4 shaded rows, each with 10 squares, that makes 40 squares shaded out of 100 in total. This visual shows exactly what we found through math, that 4 tenths is equal to 40 out of 100, which is equal to 0.4, which we can express as 40%. The two models look different, but they represent the same portion of the whole. One uses larger parts, and the other uses smaller parts. Both are equivalent ways to show 40% of the shape shaded. All right, let's express what part of the square is shaded as a fraction, decimal, and a percent. All right, we have a 5 by 5 square, which means we have a total of 25 squares, shaded and unshaded. Out of those 25 squares, 8 of them are shaded. Now, a percentage is out of 100, and we can clearly see this is not out of 100. This is out of a total of 25. So what we're going to do is write an equivalent fraction that has a total of 100. Now we can see that 25 becomes 4 times bigger. So to write an equivalent fraction, we have to multiply the numerator by the same factor. And 8 times 4 is 32. So we could say that 32% of the squares are shaded, which is equal to 0.32. Now, the reason we can just write 32 after our decimal is because 2 place values after the decimal is the hundredths place, and we can read this fraction as 32 hundredths, or 32 out of 100. And now we're going to write this as a percentage, which is just 32%. Now, in this situation, notice that our denominator of 25 fit perfectly into 100. That will not always be the case. So with any fraction that you have, you can always divide the numerator by the denominator, even if the denominator does not fit into 100. Although in this case, 25 played nice with 100, let's still demonstrate that we can convert 8/25 into a decimal equivalent by taking the numerator of 8 and dividing it by 25. So we would add a decimal here and here, and a 0 here, and 25 goes into 83 times, which is 75. When we subtract, we get 5. We add another 0, bring it down, and 25 fits into 50 twice. So we can see that using this method, we still come up with 32 hundredths, which is equivalent to 32%. All right, we have to convert each of these fractions into a percentage. So starting with 5/8, notice that our denominator of 8 does not equally fit into 100. So what I'm going to do is convert 5/8 into its decimal equivalent by dividing 5 by 8. So we're going to add a decimal here and here. 8 goes into 56 times, which is 48, which leaves us with 2. And then we add a 0 and we bring that down. And 8 fits into 20 2 times, which is 16. And that leaves us with 4. And then we add a 0 and we bring that down, which is 40. And 8 goes into 40 5 times. Now remember, a percentage is out of 100. So really, if we read the first 2 numbers after our decimal, that really is our percentage. But sometimes your percentage does not work out to be a whole number. So what we're going to do is move this decimal 2 places to the right. By doing this, we would read this percentage as 62.5%. And the decimal equivalent would just be 0.625, or 625 thousandths. Or another way to read this is 62.5%. All right, we're going to do the same thing with 45/120ths. So let's take our numerator, 45, and divide it by 120. And then we add our decimals here and here, and our 0, and begin dividing. All right, 120 fits into 450, a total of 3 times, which is 360. And the difference between these two numbers is 90. We add a 0, and we bring that down. All right, 120 goes into 900, a total of 7 times, which is equal to 840. And when we subtract, we get 60. And then we add another 0 and bring that down. And 120 fits into 600 exactly 5 times. So the decimal equivalent of 45 out of 120 is 375 thousandths. Now to convert this into a percentage, we just move our decimal 2 places to the right, and that would be equal to 37.5, or 37.5%. All right, thanks for checking out this video about percentages. I have hundreds more math videos just like this one on my YouTube channel, so be sure to check them out. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next lesson. Until next time, this is Mr. Masonette wishing you math success.